That Was Yesterday podcast is brought to you by Define Mind and Body Wellness, my wellness center here in Glastonbury, Connecticut, where we specialize in holistic services to help shortcut the process so that you can see results fast, but learn to do it in a habitual way. So many of the topics we talk about are part of the program that our clients receive, except they get much more in-depth detail. Also, my workbook of the 10-week program to lose and never look back, which is only available to our patients at Define. If you are interested in holistic body fat spot reduction, or our pod to increase your metabolism, or our cold plunge, or our sauna, which is the best sauna in the world, and that I promise you, I know that sounds biased, but you'll see for yourself. Please go to definewellnesscenter.com. You will be prompted to put your information in and make sure to mention podcast when you do, as you will be eligible for a bigger discount on our introductory services because you are a listener. Appreciate you. Have a great day and enjoy today's podcast. What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the That Was Yesterday podcast. I am your host, Joe Carabase, and today we are talking about when you want to quit. Yeah, you know how that goes. It's a very heavy feeling because there's a lot of emotions involved. There's shame, there's guilt, there's judgment, there's hopelessness, there's fear, there's anxiety. There's all of it, right? There's resentment, and it can be tough to overcome because generally when you do want to quit, it's not like you're just like, yeah, today's a good day to quit, right? It's generally a series of things not going your way towards whatever the thing is that you're working on or that's important to you that you're quitting, so to speak. So it obviously puts you in a tough place. And when you are in a tough place, it's really hard to find objectivity and clarity. And so today we're going to shine some perspective on what to do when you're in those moments, because those moments are going to happen. I don't care who you are. And I don't care how far you've been. You know, like, here's one of the tough parts when you're going through something really difficult is you can almost minimize yourself and put others on a pedestal. But the reality of it is we're all human, and every human has struggle. It's just that you may not see their struggle, and some people handle their struggle better than others. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm also super excited to announce I will be starting a new group coaching program to help people integrate some of the things that are talked about on the podcast, or something like, so for instance, you know, there's something between being able to follow something and get result and following something and feeling like you're stuck. And oftentimes that thing is self-sabotage. So many well-intended people are putting a lot of effort in and yet not getting the result that they desire, whether it's our program or really any other program out there. And it's because ultimately there's some level of self-sabotage. And it's important to hear podcasts like this and various other things to kind of help open your perspective and shine light on certain things. But ultimately, if you feel like you're still ending up in the same pattern, no matter what you decide to do, there is some level of self-sabotage at stake. And that is something that I am very passionate about helping people overcome. And the cool thing about the group is that you get a lot of personalized attention within the group. And often, though, you get the most out of the collective energy from the group. In other words, hearing resolutions for other people's stuff, or just being able to benefit from getting high-level coaching in a group environment, aka or a group rate, right? Something that's, you know, different from, say, a higher end, like one-on-one personal transformation type of thing. So if that is something that interests you, go to definewellnesscenter.com, reach out to us and just mention Joe's small group coaching, and we can set up a call and get you more information on that. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. The mind is a challenging thing, so to speak. I mean, it's beautiful, right? Like, having a mind is what gives us joy of life. It gives us love. It gives us the ability to appreciate things, to feel things, right? But then is there a downside to that? You know, and that downside is when things do not go our way. It feels like that mind is caving in, and it can almost feel like everything's going wrong. Now, as bad as things can get, that's ultimately never really the case, right? Like, it's not like everything is going wrong. It just feels that way. And life can hit in waves. Sometimes things go well, and then sometimes you feel like you're just sort of left that. There was a time where I was in Costa Rica years back, and with a buddy of mine who. The best description of a buddy of mine I can tell you is like, this guy is like, if you ever seen the movie Point Break, he's like a bank robber, skydiver. He's not a bank robber, but like he's a surfer, extreme skydiver type of fella, right? And just not the type of person you want to take surf lessons from in Salsa Brava, which is apparently, I learned this after, one of the most difficult places to surf. And I've never surfed before. And here I am, this big meathead, barely can stay on a surfboard trying to surf Salsa Brava with my Point Break instructor, like, just, he's like, yeah, man, like, you got this, dude, like, totally. And I'm like, dude, I'm all right. Next thing I know, I'm far enough from the shore where I just can't like easily get back. I can't even see how far out he is. And meanwhile, I'm on this board just trying to hang on, and I'm getting wham, 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 just hit with wave after wave after wave. And thankfully, I was able to get back to shore. That could have been really bad in hindsight, really bad. Like people have actually died from stuff like that. But I share that because sometimes that's what life feels like. Like you feel like you're just getting slammed in the face with wave after wave after wave, and you just can't get out of it. And so today we're just going to shine light on that. And what's really important for you to know is that a lot's happening in that situation, right? There's the obvious things that are going wrong, which unfortunately is a part of life, which we all know, but when those things stack up, it can just feel insufferable sometimes. Then there's how your mind interpret those things. And especially if you have underlying fear, if you have underlying anxiety, all of those things heighten. It drives me crazy when I hear people refer to themselves as, oh, I'm an anxious person, or my doctor tells me I have this sort of depression disorder, this sort of anxiety disorder. I'm like, no. You just can't convince me that, because I've seen too many people who quote unquote had that come out the other end without that, right? And I'm not like some sort of like magic person, right? What I'm saying is that when you have a level of anxiety, that's like an alarm clock that won't shut off, okay? But it's just an alarm clock. It's just a signal. That's all it is. That's not who you are. You are not an anxious person. You are somebody who has a lot of anxiety right now, because there's a part of you who is deeply scared, deeply threatened by the moment and what could happen in the future. And the antidote, the solution there is not to just take something to numb that. And I'm not against SSRIs, and you're not a bad person for taking them. But what I am against is doctors giving them to people perpetually and then not giving people a plan of action. So then they don't know how to solve the root cause. And then they say, I don't feel any different. And so the doctor says, well, take more. And then they're on this high dosage. Next thing you know, 5 years, 10 years go by. They're gaining weight along the way. They're getting further and further from who their authentic self is. And they don't feel any better about themselves. They just don't have as much anxiety. Like, that's a problem. And that what I just explained, I literally witness that that occurs in a conversation that I have at least once a week. And so I can only imagine the scale of which that's happening across the world. So when I say stuff about SSRIs, I just mean that they can be a good bridge, and sometimes you need that sort of bridge, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, but don't get it twisted. It should only be a bridge. And if you have a doctor that's trying to give you a label, I would fire him or her as soon as possible. If they're not giving you tangible, workable solutions, then what are they doing, right? They're not doing anything too well. So what I'm saying is like, if you do have a heightened sense of anxiety or an underlying sense of anxiety or fear, well, when these life events happen, it's like COVID, for example. Like I've been in the coaching business, right? So I had people pre-COVID, I've had people post-COVID. And what I found through COVID is that if people were at say on a scale of 1 to 10, if they're at a 5 in terms of like fear or anxiety or anger or sadness or anything like that, because of something like COVID, which is a global traumatic event, they went to a 7. And if people are at a 7, they went to a 9. If people are at a 9, they went to a 12. So it just magnified what was already going on inside. But again, that doesn't make you less of a person. It just means that there's more unresolved stuff that needs to be worked through, that needs to be healed. So what's really important to understand through this, and this is like kind of where it all turns, is that while life does hit us in waves, and sometimes you feel like you want to quit, like there's nothing wrong with, first of all, there's nothing wrong. I have that thought from time to time, right? Like my wife and I opened a micro school called Apogee, and boy, that's been one of the hardest things I've ever done. I've opened 7 or 8 brick and mortars. I've done a lot. That's been one of the hardest things I've ever done. And we've been challenged on every level, city, state, these crazy lunatics online, like, and just then your typical business challenges. Like it's been very difficult, but ultimately in those moments when you want to quit, like if we're going to start with that and work ourselves back, what I found to be super helpful, and you've heard it before, is like, what's the why? What is your why? That's like such a cliche. You hear that, you're like, oh yeah, what's your why? Well, yes, but the why is important because that's your North Star. So for me, with the micro schools, when I had those moments of like, gosh, I just don't know how we can do this. We're getting slammed with wave after wave. If you feel like you're about to drown, it's like, well, what's the why? And for us, it's like, well, this is the type of environment we want our kids to go to school in. It's not available to us, so we are here. We're gonna do our best to provide that, right? That's for me an extremely powerful why. I will do anything for our kids, and so that's like, okay, all right, that's the most important thing, right? So we're gonna head towards that. So the first thing, if you're looking at like takeaways, as we're thinking about when life really hits us hard and how do we get out of it, the first thing I sort of identify is, well, what is the why? Like, what is the North Star? And it's important to think of the North Star as we have since the dawn of civilization. We oftentimes set these goals of like, I want to lose 35 pounds. I want to open this successful micro school, whatever it might be, right? And we treat those goals as like you arrive or you don't, black and white. But at the end of the day, what those goals really should be is like we've always thought of the North Star. It is a direction of which to head towards. It is a set point. To my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, nobody in the history of the world has ever landed on the North Star, right? But we've used that as like a directional point, like, oh, okay, I'm here and that's there. So, okay, that helps me navigate what I need to do. Like, especially like I work a lot with women around menopause. Women going through menopause, that is one of the most challenging stages of life for so many women. It's like and some of you women listening to this, I don't need to tell you that, like, you know. But the point is that like setting a weight goal in that situation, that's like tying, 100-pound weights to your feet. It's like you're going to just ultimately anchor yourself down, because ultimately, I don't care who you talk to, they're full of shit if they tell you otherwise. You cannot control your weight. You just can't. Yes, if you deduct the 500 calories from your caloric intake daily, that turns out to be a pound of week. I get the math on that. But at the end of the day, especially a woman through menopause, you're dealing with all levels of inflammation, hormone fluctuation, water retention, fluid imbalance. And then, of course, if you have any other stuff going on with your hormones and sleep and stress and all these other, there's so many factors that the way they impact your body are far out of your control. So what I tell women in menopause is and I try to remind myself as much as I can, and I try to tell everybody I talk to is like, yeah, no, like have that goal. That's okay to have that goal, but don't rely on it as like, I'm either going to arrive or I'm not. Think of it like a North Star. Head in that direction, right? So know your why, know what's important to you there. The other thing that's really helpful to understand, and this is really, really hard, is the challenges that you face. Well, there's an equal benefit out there to those challenges. Now, look, I know some people going through some horrific shit, like the worst things you could ever imagine in your life, and I'm sure you do too. And those moments are really, really hard to find the good, but it's still there, right? It's still there, right? But you have to be able to look for it, and it's important to be able to look for it, because otherwise, it brings you to a place of complete apathy. Because if you just focus on what's wrong, you will see more of what's wrong. And you're going to feel more of what's wrong. And it's going to make that hole you're already in a lot deeper, right? So focusing on a negative is the equivalent, if you want to use the metaphor of being stuck in a hole, focusing on a negative day in and day out is the equivalent of like continually digging the hole, right? Like you're just making it that much harder for yourself. Now I understand sometimes if you're someone who's going through like some serious health issues, or you're in this situation where there's so many things that are out of your control, like you're getting those waves that are spanking you in the face every day. It's hard to refocus. I get that. I get it. But we have to understand, people, is that we are on a spectrum, right? It's not be happy or be sad. It's and. Like you can be upset and angry and work and having these things that you're up against, and you still can be making progress in those areas or other areas. But if if there's not that and towards the positive, then you're going to find yourself further and further away from where you want to be. And so an important thing to understand in this way is that you have the choice to either keep digging or figure out a way to get out. And the way to get out isn't solving the issue, right? It's the proverbial, how do you what is it like? How do you eat an elephant, right? I'm probably butchering it, but how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? You can't fit the whole thing in your mouth. And for you cuckoo people out there, I'm not suggesting we go out there and eat elephants, okay? It's a metaphor. But the point is like small steps, small hinges swing big doors. So don't worry about making it all perfect. It's just worrying about, okay, how did I just do this? Well, incrementally, a little bit smaller. How can I be better than yesterday? Those are the things that we need to focus on. And what can feel like, and this is where the mind can play tricks on us. Oftentimes things that are like naturally and easily comforting outside of like love, right? Like love can provide that naturally. Like a big proponent of a loving relationship, whether with a child or a spouse or a mom or anybody else, is that it's easy. It's just like, you don't have to try to do anything. There's just acceptance and love. It's there, right? But beyond that, oftentimes the things that make us feel comfortable aren't good for us. They're not good for our health, right? It's the food, it's the drug, it's the alcohol, it's the show, it's whatever it is that we kind of like pulls us in, sucks us in. And by the way, I'm going to get to this when I talk about grace, which is a very important part of this whole discussion. But I'm not here to say don't do any of those things. I'm not, because that's crazy talk. But what I am here to say is that like, you have to have some level of control to say that I have to do some things that are going to be holistically healthier for me. That's not just going to be comfortable or because it's easier in a moment. And so just know that like generally outside of loving relationships, the things that are going to come easy, like the instant relief you get from eating something really tasty, it comes with a really big consequence, which is the guilt and shame you feel directly after, or the calories or whatever it is, right? So sometimes comfort, though, the actual truth. So like while the dessert might pull us in, like, okay, this comfort food, quote unquote, it really isn't comfort food, because after you eat that food, you don't really feel comfortable, do you? Your stomach starts to hurt. Then you start to feel the emotions. And like I said, the shame, the judgment, all of that. It's not really comfort, right? Maybe it is. But I would argue it's self-sabotage convincing you in that moment that it is. But really what comfort are activities that holistically make you feel better, that you can do, that brings you closer to a healthier version of yourself. In other words, this could be anything. This could be walking for 10 minutes. This could be a quick workout. This could be journaling. This could be, obviously, like red light therapy, all the stuff that we offer here, right? Like things that are actually going to provide some comfort. And why do those things provide comfort? I want you to guess really quick. Anything that moves you closer to your goal provides comfort because you chose to do that thing. And in that way, you've demonstrated you actually have choice. You have the ability to make a choice. Therefore, you have power. You have a sense of control. One of the direct correlations with uncertainty and anxiety and chaos is the lack of control. And so when you are in these situations where you feel like you want to quit and all of that, I realize I work with a lot of people on this. A lot of times people overeat because they feel like that's the thing that they can control, right? And I understand that because they don't have to justify it to anybody. They can be in their own space. They can have as much as they want. They do feel a sense of something feeling good. I can understand that. And as we said, though, that doesn't ultimately lead to comfort, right? That leads to the opposite of comfort. But in those situations, when you can actually take ownership of your situation and say, yes, wait, line in the sand. Like, there are things I can do, and I'm going to start doing them. As hard as it is to start, and it is so hard in those moments to reframe and to do something positive for yourself. But when you do, man, those things add up. And when you start doing, I'm not saying you're going to transform your body by one 10-minute walk, but if you start walking every day in 30 days, that's going to have a big effect on you. Maybe not on a scale, probably not, to be honest with you, but it will lead to other healthier habits. But ultimately, it gives you a roadmap that leads you closer to that North Star. And if we can do that, then that is huge. So another thing that I want you guys to think about when you think about wanting to quit is acceptance. So if you look at the scale of consciousness, acceptance happens at a higher level. And before that comes courage, and before that comes neutrality. Before that comes willingness. And when I talk about the level of consciousness, I've mentioned this before. This is something created by Dr. Hawkins, David R. Hawkins. One of my favorite books, Letting Go. He talks a lot about this stuff. He also has a really good book, Power versus Force. But he talks a lot about the level of consciousness that exists within all of us, where you got shame on one end, and on the other end, you have joy, right? But in between, there are all these stages. And in life, we oscillate through these stages. It's not like you're just either joyful or you're shameful. Like, there's a lot that, you're in some areas you oscillate. Like, I know so many people I work with might be, courageous at work, but, feel completely hopeless when it comes to their physical body, right? Like, but the beautiful thing is, and what I try to integrate with those people and help them understand and help you understand, is that if you could be, like, you hold the ability to have, like, if you have, first of all, you have that trait of courage, you have that trait of joy, you have that trait of love, you have that trait of acceptance, you have all of the traits that are required for you to be successful in anything. And I can guarantee you there's probably an area of your life right now that in some way you are demonstrating those things. But the area that you're struggling with right now, there's likely an incongruence. The area that you're struggling, it's likely lower on the consciousness scale. It's the fear, it's the anxiety, it's the self-judgment, it's the shame, it's the guilt, it's all of that. So it's in you. We just gotta build that bridge, the congruence that you're already applying somewhere else. And an easiest example I can give you here is brushing your teeth. It's funny because I've used this example I've been coaching 20 plus years. I've used this for a long time of telling people, like, hey, like, you didn't always want to brush your teeth, right? At some point you didn't want to, your parents made you, but then it just became a part of your routine, a part of your life. And it's funny that I get to see that now with my kids, because we're getting them into the routine, right? It's not something they're used to. So it's kind of come full circle. But the point is like, a lot of people who brush their teeth every day will oftentimes look at me and say, I don't have discipline. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Bullshit. You do have discipline. You're just not exercising it with your eating. Or you're not exercising it with your exercise. And I understand it's not as easy as flipping a switch. There's so much more there. There's so much more. But let's not kid ourselves. Like, you have it in you. That's why it drives me fucking crazy when I hear doctors go on national television and say that obesity is a brain disease. It's not a brain disease. It's not. And then someone could say, oh, easy for you to say, you're a bodybuilder, blah, blah, bullshit. Yeah, I am. And I've helped thousands and thousands of people who are morbidly obese, and that's just what they are. They can't change. No. Newsflash, they can change, right? Those aren't one-offs, right? The reality is obesity is not as much as genetic as it is environmental and behavioral. And it could feel genetic if generations after generation are big, but at the end of the day, it's like there are studies that show us that all actually kind of makes sense. If you have an overweight parent, you are more likely to be overweight as an adult. If you are overweight as a kid, you can be more likely to be overweight as an adult. Like this isn't like groundbreaking. Like this stuff exists, right? And so we always got a question: why are doctors telling us that brain disease is a medicine? Well, or is a disease? Well, if it's a disease, what do you need? Medicine, right? And I'll leave that conversation there. That's for a different day. But man, that drives me crazy, as you can see. So I should have said earmuffs before. I apologize. Hopefully there are no kids who heard the profanity. But it really fires me up because what that message is telling people that it's a brain disease, what you're really doing is disempowering people. And there's so much potential within individuals. And again, I am not saying that because I'm trying to be righteous. Like, I'm saying that because I've seen it, like, time after time. The person who is completely hopeless, who hates working out, who has back pain, who has this, who has that, who has the other thing, who no doctor has been able to figure out why they can't poop every day. All of a sudden, not all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but in short order, they're wearing clothes they haven't worn in 20 years. Their back pain has gone away. They are regular. They are pooping daily. They are feeling better about themselves. They actually love to exercise, right? Like, so you just can't tell me. You just can't tell me that. And so don't accept that from yourself. And by the way, don't feel shame either. Like, you're struggling for a reason. That's where you're at on your journey. And that brings us full circle to the tangent we just went on, back to the acceptance part, which is, gosh, this is difficult to handle and difficult to swallow. And please, as I say this, I'm not on a soapbox, people. I'm not like, oh, every day is a blessing and I'm just, no. I have my own struggles. Trust me. The difference between me, I would say, is that I'm just doing my best to get me out of that hole as soon as I can. And not all the time. I have my moments like anybody else. But what I'm trying to let you know is that there's a way out, and don't isolate yourself as like, oh, it's just you. You might be going through something terrible and it might not be fair, but unfortunately, there are things that happen in life that we cannot control. And that sucks to hear because it sucks when that stuff happens. Like, there's just no way that we can just not feel that. Like, we're human. And of course, shitty things are going to make you feel shitty. That's normal. It's normal. The difference is, though, like, that's inevitable pain that you're going to feel. You can only put yourself in a position to be healthy, to make good decisions, to hopefully have less of the pain. But you can't prevent the pain. There's an old Buddhist quote, cliche, if you will, something along the lines of like, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, right? Because we're all going to have pain. But it's the things that we do or don't do in our life that bring out more pain. That's conscious choice or sometimes subconscious choice. But if we're making a lot of subconscious choices, at some point, you have to make a conscious decision to say, what the am I doing? Let's circle back and figure out how I can rewire those subconscious choices so I stop making them, right? So ultimately, you do have choice on the level if you find yourself in these patterns, because patterns ultimately are a byproduct of choices that have been built up over time. And sometimes not making a choice is a choice. Well, not sometimes. Not making a choice is a choice, right? So that happens. But we have to accept that there are going to be things that happen that we don't like or love, that are really painful and that suck, that are not fair, all the things that are negative. Like, that's just going to happen. And in those situations, you can't ignore it. Like, you're a human, you got to feel it. But at the same point, you can't let it define your life. Otherwise, what is the point? Like, that's a rational way to look at it. So just imagine what your emotional self look at it as, right? In other words, like, the parts of you who are going through something like really unfair or unjust, those are the parts of you that are rationalizing why you shouldn't get out of bed, why maybe you shouldn't live any longer, or whatever it could be, right? Because they're really hurt and scared. And the way to get them out of that is through making a conscious choice to recognize that actually I have power. I can do things to make my situation better. And then as you make those choices, you move up the consciousness ladder. And so you break the neutral plane, so to speak, when you have the courage to do so. Ultimately, that's the big thing. If you just have the courage to go into that foggy path. And I'm not actually recommending to go into a foggy path if you don't know where you are. There are some creeps out there. There's some mountain lions, people. I am not suggesting you do that per se. It's a metaphor. I like metaphors if you haven't noticed. But what I am saying is that to get yourself out of the hole, you're not going to be able to see the path in front of you. I've used this example before, but I climbed Kilimanjaro in I think it was 2015 or 2016. And I remember every sort of I don't know, 4 hours past the second or third day, it was like, oh, there's the peak, there's the summit. And then we would get to that point and it was just like, oh no, that's it over there. And then we get to that point and it's like, that's not it either. Because the clouds at that high of altitude are blocking the direct peak. You can't directly see it, especially when you're on the mountain. That's how it is in life. And just like it is climbing a mountain, you got to sometimes go up to come down, to get yourself your oxygen conditioned to be at that level and then come back down. Sometimes two steps forward, 2 steps back, or 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. That's still making some progress there because you're moving forward, right? Just like climbing a mountain. You don't go straight up all the time, but sometimes you need to, right? But a lot of it is going around, right? Because some places you can't skip. You can't just go straight up. But there are some times, like, for example, the summit of Kilimanjaro. I can't speak to a lot of other mountains. I've climbed Mount Washington, but nothing other big to speak of other than those two. But I can tell you, from those two, I can at least say that Grouse Mountain, what is the name of that? There's one in Vancouver, which is small. It's not super high up. That was one of the hardest climbs in my life. The Grouse something. I don't know. Someone who's been to Vancouver probably knows it right now and is saying it themselves. But whatever it is, that was incredibly hard and very small. I digress. The point is that when you are about to get to the top, that's when it gets really, really hard. You can't breathe as much when you're climbing a mountain. It's really, really steep. You're really, really tired. It's the shortest distance, yet it's the longest path. It's the hardest path almost because it just takes so much more to get up there, right? But in that way, that's where you got to just plow forward. It's what I call sprints. Right now, I'm working a lot. Waking up early, hanging with kids, working all day, getting home later than I want to, hanging with kids, put them down, working. It's not my choice. Well, it is my choice, but it's not my ideal, right? It's not what I want. But that's like a sprint for me right now because it's just what I have to do. It's not sustainable. And I'm not saying it's cool or that trying to brag about it. I'm just saying that to get to what's ahead of me right now, that's the path. To get to that top of the mountain, that's what you have to do. You can't just hang out there. You can't hang out at, 25,000 feet and be like, well, maybe tomorrow we'll do it. No, you're not going to be able to survive up there, right? You can't do that. You got to just get up there. You got to go. You got to dig. You got to go, right? So it's really important to understand is that when you can at least accept that there are bad things that are going to happen that you don't have control over, and you don't want to wait for them to happen and just, something bad. Because think about it. Obviously, if you go, it's what I tell everybody before hypnosis. It's people say, oh, I don't know if you can hypnotize me. Bullshit. I guarantee you I can hypnotize you. Only if you want it, though. If you're someone who's I bet you can't hypnotize me. I don't give a shit. I'm not trying to convince you, right? The point is I tell everybody in hypnosis, in order to be hypnotized, you have to be open to it. But that's really the same as anything in life. What good things in your life that are really good that you went into this is going to be the absolute worst thing ever. It's going to suck. It's going to be really bad. And then it turned out to be great. Maybe there are small instances, but generally speaking, when you go into things thinking it's going to be bad, it's generally going to be bad, right? If you have a negative outlook on it before you've ever done it. Now, if you have proof to have a negative outlook, if you had a bad experience, that makes sense, but you still want to address those fears before you move forward, right? Because otherwise you're probably going to repeat those fears, right? It's like anything. So, you got to know that pain's going to be there, but at the same point, you can control the suffering. And so what I mean by that is there has to be a level of acceptance. Acceptance gets you at a higher level of consciousness. When you're at a higher level of consciousness, you have more objectivity, more clarity, which is going to give you more power because you're going to recognize you have way more control than you think you have that you're recognizing right now. And the suffering and the pain, look, you're still going to have suffering happen. You're still human. You're a messy human, just like me, just like everybody else who's ever existed. Like, there are going to be times where you overreact, where you underreact, where you didn't do things you should have done. You could have done better, blah, 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 blah. Okay, who cares? We don't need to freaking harp on it. It's going to happen, right? But don't let it continue to be a problem for you, right? Learn from it. There's an old cliche. There's winnings and there's learnings, right? But, a lot of these cliches, there's wisdom in. And if you have something bad happen, if you can at least look at it and say, well, how did I get better? What did I learn from that? Well, that brings you into a higher level of consciousness, and that stops the suffering. And when the pain does happen, when the things that you didn't plan for happens, I invite you to reframe it as like, well, this is like the unavoidable overhead of life. Like, I didn't choose for this to happen. This happened. Therefore, it's a part of my story, part of my journey, but I don't have to let it define me. You don't have to let it define you. And so I don't know where you're at on your journey right now, but what I can tell you is that you're not as far as you think. I promise you that you're not as far off as you think from where you want to be. And when you feel like the walls are caving in, you have a lot more power than you recognize in that moment. To the extent that you're focusing on just the anxiety or the fear or the judgment or the shame, when you're focusing just on those things, you're going to see more of that. And you're going to feel less and less control. Because what are all those things really? Fear and anxiety are nothing more than survival alert signals that were ingrained in us in a time when we needed them. We still need them. But I'm saying, like, that's a part of evolution to have those things that kept our ancestors alive so that we can be here today. So they're a part of us. They're not bad either. But if we let them dictate our life, that's not what is supposed to happen. We're not supposed to allow anxiety and fear to run the course. Because when you do, that means that you're in your fight or flight. That means you're in your sympathetic nervous system, which means you're operating with a higher heart rate, more blood pressure, more stress. When you're more stressed, you're holding on to fat. I've talked about this on an earlier podcast, but it unravels, right? So to get you into the parasympathetic and to more objective and clear, you have to first accept it. Remember, use a North Star to say, okay, I'm not going to judge whether or not I'm good or bad if I land on a North Star, because actually no human has ever done that before, right? But use your goal just like the North Star. It is a set point. I'm going to head in that direction. How do I get in that direction? What things would bring me closer to there versus the hole I'm currently in right now? Don't worry about a destination. Just worry about working towards that. In that way, recognize that you're going to have periods of time like when the waves are just slamming into you and you feel like you're going to drown. But in those moments, recognize that when you start to panic, it makes things worse. When you slow down and calm down, you're able to find a way out. And so with that, guys, I wish you nothing but the best. If I can help you beyond just the podcast, reach out at Joe Carabase on Instagram and Facebook. TikTok, although I don't really log in there as much. I don't like the algorithm. I don't like every time I look through the algorithm, like I got to hear the videos that I don't want to see. I just don't like that. But I probably should get on it more and build my presence. Oh, well. In any event, that's where you can find me socially. DefineWellnessCenter.com is the fastest way to get involved in one of my coaching programs or one of my group hypnosis or one-on-one hypnosis or one of our holistic treatments. And so with that, see you next time.